With how successful the recent Kirby games have been, it's hard to remember a time when the little pink ball gave us anything less than outstanding— Wait, Star Allies came out in 2018. Okay. Never mind, different intro. Hi, my name is Voyan, and today we're going to be talking about Kirby, but first, I want to tell you a story. When I was just a small lad playing Smash 64 with my brother, there were two characters I had never seen before that fascinated me. Ness, which would actually lead to a much longer story than the one I'm about to tell you, and Kirby, who straight up ate his enemies. Link has a sword, Samus has an arm cannon, Pikachu is an electrically charged rodent, and then Kirby just... Okay. So intrigued, we went out to buy the newest game at the time, which was Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards, and whew, were you sent by God? Kirby 64 was unlike any side-scroller we had played. Ambient, inviting, experimental, scarring. In 2.5D presentation, all the levels were a delight to see and hear, and I couldn't wait to discover the enemies in each. You're telling me I can both eat the fire and then become it? Shit! For how unique each level was, the copyability combinations were even uniquer. Uh-oh. See, most Kirby games let you have one copyability. Kirby 64 lets you have two, and this mixy-matchy formula is incredible fun. We're talking Lightbulb Kirby, Fridge Kirby, Volcano Kirby. What other Kirby lets you be a volcano? Alongside this, you had what I still consider to be the best soundtrack in the series and plot, which is a very easy to follow story, but impactful nonetheless, told through quality animation. Lots of people remember it for the stuff that comes at the end. Personally, I just really remember vibing with the cast through all of it. Also, multiplayer. As a kid, you can see how much I love this game, and I suppose that just being young, you assume everyone automatically likes the same things you do, so you can imagine what it felt like when this past May, the game was re-released for Switch, and I, now much older, went online to discuss it, and that's when I realized Kirby 64 is generally considered mediocre to decent. Are you kidding me? Nobody was freaking out about Kirby 64 coming back. They were freaking out about the ESRB being raised from E to T, which, gee, why would they do that? And also, I don't know, maybe because the director of the game literally made it and then went missing shortly after? But I digress. Kirby 64 is a great game, and today I will be defending that statement by destroying the criticism with facts and logic. It's not like this game is actively hated in consensus, but it's actively not as loved as it could be, and that's where I draw the line. So let's get to the bottom of this. Why was the reception of Kirby 64 mixed and not great? What about it puts people off? Turns out the most common complaint is because Kirby 64 is too slow, easy, and short, but it runs a bit deeper than that. Kirby 64 was a side-scrolling platformer released in the year 2000 on the same console where Mario and Zelda had very successful 3D transitions years earlier. Kirby comes out and it's 2D Kirby but in a 3D environment. Thank you, Nintendo, for the bluest of balls that are also pink. 2D platforming just wasn't the most exciting thing on a home console anymore, especially 1 year before the GameCube launches and at the peak of the 3D era. I think what's funny is that Kirby's Dream Land 3, this game's direct predecessor both chronologically and in story, suffered pretty similar problems. It came out on the Super Nintendo in 1997 when Mario 64 had already been out a year. Nintendo had so much time to learn from their mistakes, so what did they do for Crystal Shards? They slowed Kirby down. Yup, I'm not kidding here. This is Superstar, this is Dreamland 3, and this is Crystal Shards. When I talk with people about the game today, this is probably the #1 complaint I hear. Kirby just feels the most restricted and clunky he's ever been. Not only does he move slower, he has limited puffing ability. Overall, and especially coming off Dreamland 3, it just feels like such a step back, and this is something that would not have occurred to me as a kid considering 64 was my first Kirby game. But that's when I also realized these complaints have a lot of comparative bias behind them. 64's ability combining mechanic was also described by some as lackluster, considering they were very unbalanced and performed one, maybe two actions. But with older games like Superstar, the abilities had a whole assortment of attacks. Fighter, for example, can do uppercuts, suplexes, hadoukens. Even Dreamland 3's Animal Friends could take a copy ability and do wild stuff with it. Meanwhile, in 64, you had the one thing. Despite all the possible fusion, it was pretty bare on the surface, and gamers prefer quality over quantity, right? Then there was the puzzles, if we can call them that. A lot of the unlockables, the crystal shards, had to be unlocked with a specific combination of abilities, and if you didn't by chance have that on you when coming through the level, you had to do it again. Oftentimes, the level didn't even offer the ability, so you had to play another level, find the enemies, and then escort yourself with that ability all the way to the spot with the crystal shard. I will admit, this is where my nostalgia kicks in. This is like the 15th time running through the game for me, so I basically know these by heart. But I get how annoying missables as a concept are, especially considering that even the newer Kirby titles do this. Ironically, the last complaint is that Kirby 64 lacks replayability and is too short. Almost like having you backtrack for abilities is kind of artificial lengthening, I think they call it. The same can be said about Kirby's slow movement. But that, friends, is the very reason I love Kirby 64. By far, the most baffling complaint here is that of no replayability. What kind of drugs were they on in 2000? The most fun aspect of Kirby 64 is that you can play through a level, get copy abilities, and do everything you want to, then immediately play that level with a different ability, and it changes so much. This goes for bosses too. Never before did you have so many options at your disposal. The crystal shards were locked behind random abilities because, yes, these are very unbalanced. Bomb and Cutter is my favorite and severely OP, same thing with fireworks. You can start the game, get these in the first level, and never put them down because they're so easy to play by. But you are encouraged to try out new ones via the crystal shards, since the game will punish you with a bad ending if you do not mix it up. I'm sure you're catching on to this by now, but Kirby 64 is less about exploration and more about experimentation. Combining and messing around with the abilities, seeing what feels right, and challenging yourself for the ones that don't. Like, I've replayed this game a dozen times. Do you think I'm always using the same ability? No, because that's what gives this game its edge, or point, if you will. That was a bad joke, but anyway. Ever since this game came out, it's always been deducted from for what people want. They wanted a 3D Kirby, they wanted a game as fluid as Superstar. It's hilarious, this game is literally a sequel to Dreamland 3, but it's not called Dreamland 4. It's something entirely new, and nobody seems to get that. Is it any worse than Dreamland 3 or Superstar because it doesn't have complex levels? No, it's just different. Is it any worse than Dreamland 3 or Superstar because it wants you to experiment rather than explore? No, it just changes up the satisfaction of discovery. Is it any worse than Dreamland 3 or Superstar because Kirby controls like molasses on sandpaper? Actually, that one is debatable. For anyone who's ever played Kirby 64, it should be obvious how much this game prioritizes its atmosphere. Incredible music and incredible environments, whether that's a UFO, an autumn forest, a shopping mall, or the catacombs. But especially the autumn forest. This track is holy, it's a divine seance, and I will always hear it the minute I think of this game, even though it plays in just one level. But that's the amazing part about Kirby 64 is how each level is totally different from the rest. Your surroundings come to life, and the 2.5D with a fixed camera actually does cool things within them. I almost feel the justification of Kirby moving slower is that you take your time and immerse in / appreciate these areas rather than speeding through them because it's the 5th time you've seen the backdrop and heard the same music. Because do you think a level like the factory would drop as many hints as it did if people just zoomed through it in 2 seconds? Alright guys, look. Kirby 64 is a great game. Perfect? No. But decent? Come on. It's a charming platformer with lots to offer for anyone willing to accept that it's not this or that, but its own thing. So give it a try, take your time with it, mess around with it, bask in the glorious music and visuals, and also what they let pass in a kid's game. But I cannot emphasize this last part enough. For the love of God, don't play it on Switch unless that is your only option.